Hi, I just want to welcome Jen here today to our video series and have a little chat to her about her experience in regards to working in real estate investments as an auditor, but also dealing with a narcissistic family and how that can play out and how it can affect your ability to do your job and also to how it affects your personal life. So, Jen, I just want to welcome you to say hi.
Thank you. Right.
And I just want to know, number one, like, what is your business, or like, what is the job that you do all about? Because real estate investment auditor, that's a little bit complex, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, I've actually only been in this role for just under a year. Before that, I worked in a public accounting firm where I did a lot of consulting in risk management and internal audit. So yeah, about a year ago, I decided to go to industry. So real estate investment is we buy apartment buildings, like multi-residential apartment buildings. We fix them up to make them look nicer because a lot of them are all old from they have the parquet flooring and all that. So we go in and upgrades, and then obviously you can charge a higher rent, and that's where we make our money is investing in these apartment buildings. So that's where we do. It's a very male-dominated industry. So in our company, I think it's 75% men and 25% women. So there's a lot of hopefully none of them see this, but there's a lot of egos to deal with. So yeah, it can be challenging at times to try and tell people that they're not doing what's in the best interest of the company. So my job is to kind of come in and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, and do we have the right controls to mitigate the risk of our organization, filing material misstatements in our financial statements because we have partners as well as are we doing the right things to make sure that we don't get sued or that we have too many people working, different things like that. So it's a job where people hear the word audit and want to run the other way and don't want to hear what you're saying, but it's really about working collaboratively to help people do their jobs more efficient and more effective.
Oh, that's actually really interesting. I find that I would never have thought that's what that was. So that's so cool. Okay, so I guess my next question for you is let's go into like what it was like growing up. So what was your family like?
So I was born to a single mom. Was a couple weeks away from turning 19. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. And back in that time, having a teenager have a child was a big embarrassment to your family. As the story goes, my mom was the only one that wanted to keep me. My grandfather wanted her to get an abortion, and my grandmother wanted me to be put up for adoption. So it was a big disgrace to our family that I was born. I also had an alcoholic grandfather and a grandmother that didn't know how to say no, and just kind of went with the flow. There was 6 kids. I technically was the 7th because I was raised by my grandparents. And my grandfather was very verbally abusive to me, especially when he was drunk. He never hesitated to remind me that I wasn't part of our family because he had no idea who my dad was. I don't know who my dad is. My mother blamed me for everything that was wrong in her life and that I somehow owed her something because she decided to keep me and nobody else wanted me. But yet she was the first person to walk out on me. Eventually, my one aunt and my grandmother and my mom used me as a pawn in their lives of getting back at each other, of trying to outdo each other, whatever. So I was raised to always do the right thing, which is probably why I'm internal audit to begin with. My daughter makes fun of me all the time for it. But yeah, I was always doing the right thing, being the good little girl, doing what was expected, a goody two shoes, as you can hear my daughter in the background. To make everybody happy, because it was my job to make everybody happy. It didn't matter how I felt. And if I ever cried, I was told to quit feeling sorry for myself. So there was not a lot of support. And like I remember in high school, I used to write my feelings down on a piece of paper, and they found it one day and I got in trouble for it. And I still to this day don't understand. Like, it was in my room. It was my personal stuff. But for some reason now, as I'm older, I wrote that stuff down, and they didn't want to realize that maybe they were contributing to some of this and would have needed to change their behavior. And so it was easier just to force me to change my behavior. And then as I got older, I bounced around and probably lived with everybody in my family. My grandfather told me I was a freeloader and I couldn't live there anymore when I hit college. And it's just, so I've pretty much done a lot. I learned to cook when I was 8 because my mom got in a car accident and was flat on her back for eons and played the victim of that car accident for the rest of her life. And so, yeah, I've just been a very independent person. I've only ever been really able to rely on myself. And I think I've done quite well in my life for having to go through this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So like
hopefully you can cut that out.
It's so it sounds to me like it's pretty typical what I call an emotionally abusive childhood, a lot of codependency going on there between your grandparents and obviously your mother as well, and some shame shifting and just a lack of emotional acknowledgement and validation. So it's so typical of so many upbringings nowadays that's a similar story. And it's really sad. Can I ask, did he go to any of the wars?
I'm sorry, did he what?
Was he in any of the wars?
No.
Okay. All right.
He was a farmer.
Oh, he was a farmer. Okay. Okay, so basically, what I'd like to know is like, when you started having your relationship with your ex-husband, was that also quite a toxic relationship?
Yes. So when I married him, everything obviously was great for the first little while. We moved in together, I think within 6 months. I remember shortly after I moved in, it was the winter and we were shoveling the snow, and I'd never used a snowblower before because we lived in the country. We had tractors that emptied our driveway. And I blew snow up against the house and he lost it on me. And like, it was such a big deal. I remember putting a butter dish in the dishwasher and it was wood, or maybe it was it had a painted and it ruined the butter dish, and it was like the end of the world that I had done this, as opposed to realizing it was an honest mistake. So things started to show up that again, if I wasn't perfect, I wasn't good enough for him. Anything that went wrong was my fault. It was my job to make him happy. I think before we got divorced, one of the comments to me was, if I would just listen to him, then our relationship would be fine. Like our relationship would be perfect. I would try and do everything that he wanted, and it still wasn't good enough. He had made the accusation that I didn't keep the house clean enough. The meals I made was terrible. I made bad choices in that. He had got married to me and I'm his wife, so he expected to have sex. And when I didn't have sex with him, then that was why he got married. So I owed that to him because I married him. And then after I had my children, I was damaged goods. Then when we had our kids, I remember the tipping straw for me was my daughter was walking down the hall and took one of his t-shirts and rolled it up in a ball instead of having it off, and he lost his shit on her. She was 4, 5, and I'm like, I'm done. I cannot do this to my daughter. But yeah, it was constantly, I got promoted and all he did was feel sorry for himself. It wasn't congratulations, great job, like woohoo, now we're gonna have more money. It was, well, look at me, and then it was, well, you're always rubbing it in my face that you make more money than me. But I was the one that I made more money. I'm the one that raised the kids. I cleaned the house. I did all the cooking, grocery shopping. He'd get up on the weekends and do whatever the hell he wanted. And if I ever asked for anything, then I was being selfish, but yet I owed him sex.
It sounds very narcissistic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very, very narcissistic.
And even now with my daughter, he does the same thing. Like it's
yeah,
her fault. She needs to make him happy. And I think my son is starting to notice that as well.
yeah. Always,
Yeah.
yeah, always looking for someone else and like shame shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Nothing
goodness.
was ever his fault.
Oh no,
He's
it
a very
couldn't
good
be.
victim. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my next question is like, how did this affect your self-esteem while you were working?
It definitely drove it more into the ground. I was constantly questioning myself and thinking like, why, when I got a promotion, did I really deserve this? What aren't they seeing at work that my husband, who's supposed to know me inside and out and loves me, is seeing? Um, so when I was getting ready to be promoted to a senior manager, I asked to get an executive coach because we had a bunch of programs. And I asked for an executive coach to build up my confidence because everybody at work could see something in me, but I wasn't the one seeing it. And they're like, we got to figure this out and fix this and better support her. As opposed to me getting it home, I was getting it at work. So I started going to an executive coach. And that's when I realized, hang on a second, I'm not the one that's broken. It was him that was broken. And that's what started the beginning of the end of my marriage.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really took having other people outside of me point out to the good things that I was doing. And I remember one of the partners describing to me one day, she was leaving and I was so upset because she was an amazing mentor to me. Like, because again, even in the firm, the percentage of women in leadership was really low as well. And she was an amazing resource, an amazing mentor to me. So when she told me she was leaving, I was really upset. I'm like, I can't believe that you're leaving. Like, what am I going to do? And she's been amazing. Like even after she left, she still mentored me, but she sat there and said, you know what, Jen, you're going to be fine, and told me all these things about myself. And I'm just looked at her and I'm like, I'd really like to meet that woman. Like I had
Yeah.
no idea who she was talking about. Like because I've never in my entire life, no one ever complimented me. It was always what I was doing wrong. And I find I've done that with my own kids at times too. And I'm trying very hard to not do that. So it's having that, we call them at work, that sponsor that lifts you up and pulls you out of your funk and says, hello, this is what your value is. And so, yeah, it took a lot of people to pull me out of it. And then me finally saying, you know what, no, I deserve this. And then me putting in the hard work myself.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's all about like everyone else can tell us so many things and it can help a little bit, but like it's how we actually relate to ourselves and treat ourselves
Yeah.
that makes the difference. Um, so when you like started putting all this work into yourself, like how did you notice that you started to change like within your personal life and then within your business life as well? Like when you're at work, like how did you notice you started showing up differently?
I think, well, part of it is I took about a couple, 2, 3 months off of work. I slept a lot. And I started meditating, which I totally thought was a crock. But as I started to doing it, I remember seeing colors and thinking, what the heck is going on? Like I reached out to one of my friends who does it and I'm like, okay, this is what's happening to me. And they're like, oh my God, Jen, that's amazing. Like some people do it for however long and never experience that. So it was really about looking inside of myself and saying, okay, how could I have changed that? And what is the messaging that's coming from the voices in my head from my childhood and my ex-husband, and what did I really believe that I was as a person? And really kind of, as Shrek says, pulling the layers back of the onion and saying, okay, hang on a second, when you hear something about yourself, it's, do I really feel that way about myself, or is this person projecting on me?
Yeah.
So it's really about looking at, like I said, about having self-awareness, is really looking inside and believing who you are and understanding what your values are and then living those values. And I was so busy trying to make everybody else happy that I didn't know what my values were. It was, well, whatever Jane Doe's values are, those are my values. Or John Doe or Bill or Bob, it's, oh, well, that must be what I am. Or if someone asks you a question, I'm going to wait for someone else to answer it first because I don't want to be wrong. Even though my answer is not wrong and it may not be right. It's just my answer. And I have a right to that opinion. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I have, based on my experiences in my life, that's what I feel at the time, and that's okay. So it took a lot and a lot of exercise. I worked out a lot. I think kind of get that anxiety out of my body.
Yeah, shift emotions.
Yeah. And then I went back to work and it all came flooding back. And like I had spent all that time working on it. And then within one day of walking back into work, it was like I hadn't taken any time off and nothing. Like I felt like I went right back to where I was. And I thought, this is not the place for me. They're not supporting me. They don't understand. And they're just hammering me down. And it made me understand why I had gone as low as I had gone. So it took about a month for me to convince them to let me go and package me out because I had been there for almost 17 years. And they finally did that. And that gave me another 2 months to kind of start again and say, okay, I got this. There are better environments out there. And then I found this job. And even in this job, I struggled for a while. But I now have a new boss and he's very motivating and engaging and like, Jen, you got this. And he builds me up as opposed to pushing me down and is very supportive. And there's a ton of other senior leaders in that organization that are, yes, we're going to work together. And this may be your level and I may be up this letter, but we're still a team. It's not, I'm 2 levels above you and I have the right answers and you don't. It's, no, you've been doing this for 20 some years. We value your opinion. And it's knowing that they appreciate what I have to bring to the table as opposed to knocking me down because I'm not towing the company line. I said to them, you've hired me to tell you the truth. And I'm going to tell you the truth and it's going to hurt. But you have the right, you have the control to decide what you want to change and what you don't. You may want to accept that risk and say, you know what, I can live with that risk. And this risk is, oh my gosh, this is going to cost us millions of dollars. We need to fix it now. All I do is present you the information. You do what you want. And I think they realize that I'm not coming in there and telling them how to change their business. I'm just saying, these are the risks. You need to figure out what you can live with and what you can't. So it's been a huge shift from where I was. And the fact that when I walked back into that company after how many months off and everything just came flooding back, I'm like, I'm not in the right spot.
I love the analogy you just used about risk in regards to business, because everything you just said there would be perfectly aligned if you used that same thought process in life. You know, like, look at these risks. Can you live with them or can you not? You know, like, and I feel like quite often we're raised in families where we haven't had that support. We become quite fearful. We become quite scared to take risks and to do things, you know, fearing other people's opinions and judgments and all that sort of stuff. So I felt like what you just said there was absolutely beautiful. And do you use that for your own life?
No.
No?
I've never made that connection myself. As soon as you said that, I'm like, wow, how could I not have made that myself?
That's amazing.
I don't, but oddly enough, my ex-husband was European and I'm like Scottish, Irish, English. So it's definitely a different culture. And when I married into that family, they were very much about using guilt and manipulation to get you to do what you want. And the phrase of, well, you should do this. And I remember someone said something to me once about, well, when someone says should, they're projecting onto you. And I thought, you know what? And I got to the point where I learned to not care what they said. Like my mother-in-law would say to me, oh, are you going home anytime soon? You're getting kind of gray. And I said to her, how does the color of my hair impact your life? Like, but yeah, it was because she can't handle having gray hair. So why should I? I will let my hair get that gray sometimes before I color it. It's a matter of having time and the energy to do it. It doesn't bother me. Like if my whole head was gray, yeah, I might be concerned about it. But if I have a little bit of inch, but you know what? Everybody shows their roots. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it was just stuff like that. And I just thought, wow, you guys, and I wonder if that was kind of the trigger for me as when I was a kid too, is all you care about is how good I make you look.
Yeah.
You don't care about me. You don't care that you just insulted me. You care that if your friend came in right now, they would say, oh, look at how prim and proper Jen is. Look at how put together she is. She's such a classy lady, as opposed to, shit, Jen has 2 kids and works full time and is a single mom and probably doesn't have time for herself very often. But it's you're making me look bad. So yeah, I kind of got to the point where I'm like, I don't care, but at the same time, I think it depended on what it was. Sometimes I really did care and would take it personally. But now I've got to the point, I watched this really interesting video on parenting, and it doesn't matter what your neighbors think about, you need to listen to your children. And I remember, I think it was before Christmas, I got mad at my daughter for something. And after I was done, I'm like, wow, that was all coming from a friend of mine nattering at me about something and that she was projecting about. And so I went to my daughter and I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry that I said that. And this is why I said that. I let this person get in my head as opposed to listening what you needed. I projected on you what I thought she was projecting and what I thought was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I really do need to stop doing this. And it's hard because society, every Facebook post you make, Instagram post you make, there's always someone that's going to tell you you're wrong. Like there are some, I read them and I get so worked up and I think, oh my God, like who do these people think they are? And I'm like, okay, you got to shut this off and walk away from it, because it messes with your head. And at the end of the day, I have to keep reminding myself what's my values and what's the best way to support my kids for what they need, not what my mother-in-law is telling me or society or Facebook or whatever. I need to do what's best for them.
Exactly. And I think if more parents did that, then and were less worried about how someone is going to perceive them, then they could make some better choices for their children. Because I feel like a lot of people are, or a lot of kids are brought up real pressured because they have to be what their parents want them to be. And all that makes them feel is unaccepted for who they are.
My daughter says to me the other day, oh, Mom, I saw this kid show up at school in a Porsche. Clearly they have a lot of money. And she had said this one other time too. And I said, you know what? I said, yeah, she may have a lot of money, but you know, that comes with an awful lot of responsibilities that probably cause her a lot more anxiety than you have. I said, she probably has to act a certain way. She has to make sure her parents look good. She has to be all prim and proper. She probably has to get amazing grades. She can't do all these things. Her parents are probably never around. I said, so as much as she has whatever she wants, it comes at a cost too. I said, you're a lucky kid. You're a middle-class kid. You're not deprived of anything. I said, at times, you're probably a little bit of a spoiled brat. I said, but the expectations aren't there. I don't expect you to get straight A's because I know that's just not the type of student she is. And I can live with that. If she's passing and doing something she's passionate about, I can live with that.
Yeah.
So I said, you can sit there and be jealous about what other people are doing, but everybody has their bag of poo, so to speak. And don't take other people's poo, just deal with your own poo.
And everything looks all nice and shiny on the outside in society nowadays, and on Instagram, on Facebook, they're pretty pictures and they're pretty life. But to be honest, we all know that's not true.
Yep.
It's just projecting probably a life that most of them want to have compared to what they actually have.
Yes, but I look at my best friend's Facebook and I think, wow, that's not like when we talk, this isn't what she's giving me an impression of. And then I look at that and think, oh, did I miss something? Then again, I talk to her again and I'm like, no, that's just what she wants you to believe she has. And it's convincing. And I know her inside and out. And even sometimes I'm like, wait a second. So
it's definitely
easy to change the narrative.
So So if let's just looking back as well, like what would you say, like how did your work suffer the most during the time when you were with your husband in that narcissistic relationship?
Uh, the biggest thing is that I took a lot of things personally and internalized it and always made it my fault. Um, yeah. And then again, tried to make everybody happy at the expense of myself to the point where you gain weight, you don't want to get out of bed. You know, you can do better than you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was stretched really thin.
And how did that affect your work? Sorry.
It,
Like,
like it was difficult at times to like when you go into a meeting, like I have to present to clients what their deficiencies were, and they would get mad at me, and I'd be like, oh my god, I got to take this off, I've upset them.
oh,
Or you go home and you feel like, oh my god, I'm not very good at my job because I upset the client, and oh my god, they're going to fire us, and then I'm going to get fired. So it caused a lot of anxiety and insecurities of, can I really do this job? And then it's you kind of get to a point where you're walking on eggshells everywhere in your life, not just at home, but then you take it to work and do the
mm,
same thing. That, and I worked a lot of overtime to kind of feel like, I don't know if it was to escape being with him, or I felt like I had to work that much harder to prove that I was good enough to be there.
yeah.
Yeah.
That must have been really tough for you.
Especially because my kids were really young too.
Yeah. What lessons did you learn during this time um, that you were able to transfer over into your own life, into like your future life? Was there anything that you like learned during that time that you were able to bring forward that's actually helpful?
To trust my gut. I am a very intuitive person, and I can call bullshit a mile away. And I used to always say, no, it's just me. But no, it's, I can tell you, I always say, you can put me a room full of 100 people and put one narcissist in there, and I'll be attracted to them in 5 seconds. I can pick them out very quickly. So it's learning to say, my gut is trying to tell me something. Go and look for more signs.
Yeah.
And listen to when they're talking, listen to them, because a narcissist is very good at telling you what they're insecure about, but they'll
Yeah.
tell you it's you.
Yeah.
Like whatever they say. And it took me a very long time to realize that that's what my ex was doing. But I finally realized if I listened long enough and stopped taking what he said personally and flipped it around, he was telling me what his issues were. So it's
Yeah.
stop and listen, do less talking, and don't react.
Yeah.
Just let them, like I always used to say, let him spew all over the table. And the less you react, the more it pisses them off. But if you don't engage, then you can't fight, because they
Hmm.
can't. That, and as in my job, stick to the facts. You can't argue with facts. Take
Hmm.
the emotion out of it and just say, okay, well, you were supposed to be here at 5 o'clock. You didn't show up till 5:30, and leave it
Amazing.
at that.
Yeah, because I was literally just about to ask you, what would your advice be for anyone in this situation? But you basically just already gave it to me.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Okay, so that was going to be my last question. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on, and it's been quite amazing to hear your story, especially in the male-dominated industry and dealing with narcissists and your home life and your married life, and even dealing with these people in the workplace, um, which is amazing to hear about. So yeah, I just want to, yeah, again, let you know how grateful I am to have you here. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
No problem. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And
Okay.
hopefully it'll help someone else cut the ties from a narcissist and know that you're an amazing person and you got this.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.